College and pulling all-nighters has kind of become synonymous nowadays, and unless you're just pulling an all-nighter for fun, which don't do that, it's terrible, you probably have a test the next day. Well, science says that's not the best way to go about it, so we're going to talk about science-based approaches to study habits and methods. Welcome to College Explained, where I give you my tips and tricks for having a successful transition from high school to college. I'm Austin Money, and why should you care? Well, I've spent the last decade of my life at a university, the first 6 years of which as a student, and the past 4 years as a professional staff member. I've made these mistakes in college, I've seen people make these mistakes, and I don't want you to make the same mistakes. Today we're talking about studying because half of my friends did terrible their first year, and they were all incredibly smart people. They had like 32 or higher on their ACT, and coming from high school to freshman year, they thought it was going to be a cakewalk. Well, I had friends that failed out their freshman year that were incredibly intelligent. Being smart and doing well in high school does not translate to college and succeeding. So let's talk about study habits and methods to set you up for success. Before we get into the 3 study habits and the 6-step studying method, let's talk about 2 non-academic keys to your academic success really quick. First one is exercise. Exercise does 3 things for you. 1, it optimizes your mindset to improve alertness, attention, and motivation. 2, it prepares and encourages nerve cells to bind to one another, which is essentially the cellular basis for logging new information. And 3, it spurs the development of new nerve cells from stem cells in the hippocampus. So essentially, exercise primes your brain and gets it ready to learn, and it helps retain that information, which is essentially learning. And the second key is sleep, and it does 2 things for you. 1, you have a higher capacity to focus when you're getting adequate amount of sleep. And 2, the information that you've learned that day is consolidating into your memory, leading to learning new information. Pulling an all-nighter has been shown to impact your cognitive function for up to 4 days. That's likely just you being in a cycle of lower cognitive function and never getting out of that cycle. Get sleep. It's going to help you. On to the 3 positive studying habits that you should start building right now. If you hate studying, it's going to be a long 4 years. So let's turn that and build it into habits to set yourself up for success. The first positive studying habit is taking breaks. I've seen so many people sit in the library or at their desk for hours and hours and hours, and a lot of that just isn't productive. What I want you to do is sit down to study, and then mark the time when you feel yourself getting distracted. For the average person, it's about 25 to 30 minutes at one time. That's how long they can focus on studying. And the best part about that is we can recharge in about 5 minutes. So what I want you to do is mark that time down and then start doing an on and off cycle. 25 minutes on, 5 minutes off. And in those 5 minutes, do something that you enjoy. These little microcycles of 25 on and 5 off are going to create a macro cycle of your full studying for that day. And using these microcycles, you can build in studying periodically throughout your day. So if you have a half an hour break in your day just randomly, you can knock out one of your microcycles and really take advantage of your day. And the next positive studying habit is building a positive reward system for yourself. In those 5 minutes in your microcycle, do something that you enjoy. Reward yourself with something small. But after your full macro cycle, after you're done studying for that day, reward yourself with something big. See, studying doesn't provide us dopamine, which is just a chemical in your brain, and that's basically how we live. That's the positive reinforcement cycle. You get dopamine from a text message and playing video games and hanging out with people. That stuff is easy for us. That's the stuff that we enjoy. But studying, that doesn't give us dopamine, so we don't like it. What we're trying to do is positively reinforce this behavior with a positive reward system. And it all starts with how you positively reward yourself while you're studying. My first year, I created a reward system that actually works to this day. I would go to class in the morning and I would get back to the dorm in the afternoon, and all I wanted to do is play video games with all of my friends because we all had morning classes, so we had like half of a day left over to do whatever we wanted. But I knew that I wasn't going to get studying done that way, so I had to study first and then reward myself second. If I rewarded myself first, the studying was painful because I got all of the dopamine up front. And it made studying worse because relative dopamine levels, I went from a high to a real low, and that just wasn't going to work. So I had to delay my gratification, and from 7 a.m. until 3 p.m. was exclusively schoolwork. But I knew when I got back at 3 p.m., I had the entire evening to do whatever I wanted to do. And I did this Monday through Friday, and come Saturday and Sunday, that was also my time because I just knocked out all of my schoolwork in class from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. Monday through Friday. We tend to do things that we enjoy, so if you start positively rewarding yourself, you're probably going to start liking studying more. And that's exactly what we want. We don't want it to be painful for 4 years. That'd be terrible. Study first, reward later. And lastly, we want to build a dedicated study location or at least materials. What's the primary purpose of your bedroom? What about your kitchen table or your living room? It's not studying, but the problem is that's where a lot of people study. And it can be really difficult in a dorm. So if you don't have a dedicated study location like the library or can't get there all the time, let's start talking about dedicated studying materials that can kind of do the same thing. Another way to reinforce these studying behaviors, like having a dedicated space, is having dedicated materials. Get a lamp, write on a sticky note, study lamp, and stick that sticky note on the lamp. Only use it when you're studying. That's your study lamp. You have a dedicated material, you only use it, and you're building that mindset of this is when I'm studying. It gets you in the zone, primes your brain, and you're ready to study. Knock it out. You could also do it with a dedicated notebook or a dedicated pen. Start finding these materials that you only use for studying, and that's going to be your school materials. You're training these behaviors to create positive studying habits. We want to reinforce these. They've found that on average in a controlled study, that students that implemented this habit had a 1 grade point higher average, and that's crazy. There have been plenty of people that are doing what you're doing, facing the same life struggles that you're facing, but how did those people get enough sleep, have enough time to study, and still have a social life? Well, that all comes down to time management and being efficient. I want you studying less by studying better. That's exactly what we're going to do in the 6-step method. And this all starts with how we've historically been taught to learn, and that's called rote memorization. Rote memorization is just reading it over and over and over. If we want to learn, we read the textbook, and then we study the textbook. Well, that's how you forget things. It's really good for recognizing concepts, but like we talked about earlier, recognizing doesn't equal recall, and that's what we want. Step 1 is to survey. Before you read the chapter, I want you taking a couple minutes to just thumb through the chapter and looking at how the author organizes their information. What graphs are in there? What headings are in there? What information is jumping out at you? Step 2 is to question. Before you read the chapter, go directly to the practice questions at the end of the chapter. If there's not practice questions there, email your professor and ask them for an old test or if they have practice questions. These practice questions are what you need to know. It's boiling that chapter down to the most essential components. Those practice questions are the most important information within that chapter, and that's what we want to know. And step 3 is to finally read your chapter and take notes. I'm convinced textbooks are just as long as they are, but if you don't know how I feel about textbooks, watch that video. I won't go on another rant. Anyway, in the last step, we figured out what is important, and that's what your notes should be, because that is what you're going to be tested on. And you want to know what you're going to be tested on. So we're going to take notes based on the practice question. And this same process applies to your lectures. How many times have you taken what you thought were great notes in a lecture, gotten home that night, went to study, and it might as well have been gibberish? It just didn't make sense. That's because we immediately start forgetting. The key to good lectures is having good notes. And step number 4 is to rephrase. This is how we go beyond just recognition and get to recollection. Every time that you find an answer to your practice question, put that answer in your own words. We want to rephrase that so you start to understand the core concepts. And the best way to start to rephrase things is try to teach someone what you're learning. You can't teach what you don't know, and if you try, you're going to very quickly figure out what gaps in knowledge you have. And that's exactly what we want. That way we have time to correct them before the test. Students who teach others are more likely to have higher test scores, and that's exactly what we want. Step 5 is recall. We want you practicing in the most efficient method, and that is recalling the answers to your practice questions. Look at your practice questions, and without even looking at your notes, answer those in your own words. What is the core concept? This is really where you're going to start to figure out if you are in that recognize stage or the recollection stage. If you just recognize every core concept, that's going to give you a false sense of preparation going into your test. We want you to be able to recall this information. Practice tests have been found to be incredibly important to doing well on tests, and the easiest way to go about that? Flashcards. And if you want to save some paper, there are so many flashcard apps out there. Just pick one and try it out. And the last step is repetition. Spaced repetition is performing the recall step when we're about to forget something. The longer we go without reviewing the material, the more material we're going to forget. And to stop that from happening, we're going to use spaced repetition. With material that you know better, you can wait a longer period of time before you review it. With material that you know not as well, you're going to have to review it a little more often. So take me in accounting. I'm going to have to review that a lot more often than something that I actually enjoy or that I'm good at. This means that we need to do steps 1 through 5 as soon as possible to allow us as much time as possible for step number 6. Try doing steps 1 through 5 on day 0. On day number 1, do step 6, and then wait a few days. On day number 4, repeat step 6. If it goes well, wait a few more days and repeat it on day 7. Over time, you'll start to learn how often you need to review this material. And I would recommend doing this at least once a day, alternating material. You're more than likely taking 4 to 5 classes, and you need to fit all of those classes into this schedule. So do it once a day with alternating material, and that way you hit every class at least once a week. If you found this video helpful, go ahead and hit that thumbs up button, as it greatly helps me because it tells the YouTube algorithm that people are engaging with this video, so it puts this video in front of more people. And the whole goal is to help more people. If you want to be a part of our community of personal, professional, and financial development, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I'm putting out 2 to 3 videos every single week geared towards giving you tools to succeed in and after college. I'm proud of you, I love you, and I'll see you next time. Practicing. I don't like that. Hopefully we can cut that.